Okay, here we go. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Jamison Travis, a private investigator who's with us today. As the principal owner of Travis Investigation since 1999, Jamison has handled all kinds of cases that have come through her office, but the most rewarding by far are the missing person cases where she has made a significant impact on reuniting families with loved ones. Alongside her investigative work, she is a dedicated freelance photographer.
Yes.
Very cool. Her unique interest lies in photographing construction materials, emphasizing the journey of construction rather than just the final product. By capturing the essence of the construction process, she highlights the often overlooked details and the intricate beauty of the building journey. Her work was notably displayed and reviewed by the Austin American Statesman, featuring images from the construction site of the Austin State School for the Deaf. This is so cool. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for being with us
Sure.
today.
Thank you all for having me and ask me anything.
Well, we have a list of questions.
Okay,
so
good.
I'm just going to dive right in. But anytime you guys want to, anybody in person or online, if you guys have questions too, please feel free to just chime in and we can have a discussion. So
Okay.
I was wondering if you could kind of start us off by talking a little bit about how you got involved in this line of work.
Okay. Well, I came to Austin in 1985 after grad school, and when Ann Richards was governor, since I'd been a freelance photographer even in high school, college, graduate and then graduate school, I worked for Libby Linebarger. I don't know if anybody remembers her, but she was a state representative, and I was her personal photographer. So I attended all the events, going on then. And so I always had this knack for finding people, I guess. And so I got married and then had a baby in 96. And then 3 months later, my husband left. So here I was, a single mother with a newborn, and I didn't want to put him in daycare for 9 or 10 hours a day. So I was getting creative and thinking, what could I do to make a living? So it actually arose that I started my business out of my bedroom in 99, and then I incorporated in 2002.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
I actually sold I sold my diamond out of my engagement ring.
Mhm.
And then I bought one of these big honking computers, the first computer. And that's what I started with.
Oh, wow. But so you needed to do something that you could do from home if possible.
Correct.
But how did you choose this particular line of work?
Well, before I got pregnant,
Mhm.
I went to work with a local PI in
Mhm.
town
Mhm.
for a very short time. And then I quit there for reasons I don't want to go into. But I quit, and then the two young men that worked for this person also quit. And then they started a business, and they asked me to come and work with their business. But they didn't know the first thing about running a business. So within probably 6 months, their business went belly up. And so then I just thought, I can do this, have an MBA, so I can do this. And so I just started my company, basically.
You make it sound easy, but it seems like this is not easy work to do, right?
Well, I mean, at first it wasn't easy because I know, for the first 5 years, you either make it or break it.
Yeah.
And I never went into the red in my business. I was always in the black. It was really hard the first 5 years. I had a case that took me down to Laredo, that I got hired from a guy who hired me because he thought that his brother was going to knock off their mother. So I, just being one person, I didn't have any employees at that time. So, I had to get a babysitter for my son, and I went down to Laredo. I had to hire another company because it was 24-hour surveillance. And by the time, at that time I was charging $20 an hour. So by the time I come home, pay the babysitter and everything, I'm making like $6 an hour,
Oh my God.
It was hard. I was on food stamps, I can tell you, for probably the first year in business. It was really hard to make ends meet, but things progressed and I got a case from an attorney that I met
Mhm.
when our kids were in at the Y together in a swimming class, and that kind of set me over. So, yes,
To get licensing?
yes, you do.
How
So,
would that work?
so because you have to have 3 consecutive years in the field, and then, but because I was, okay, a year and a half I worked for somebody. And then so they couldn't discriminate because I got pregnant during that year and a half, so I didn't have 3 consecutive. But I had to get a qualified manager to be my manager for a year and a half. And then once I got the manager off my license, then I took a manager's test and passed that, and then I started my own company
3 consecutive years working
in the field.
in the field
Yes,
of
with somebody who's
private
who's
investigation.
correct.
Okay, so you had a little bit under your belt then.
A little bit.
In order to get started.
Yeah, not a lot, but a
Yeah,
little bit.
A little bit, yeah, it's still pretty impressive. Okay, so what would a normal day, what does a normal day look like as a private investigator?
There is no
there-
normal day. Well, now I have employees, so, and they're all W-2 employees, and they've been with me for a minimum of 15 years. And I work with them, you know, they do my field work. And so, a normal day, it depends on the case.
Mhm.
We just finished a case where a woman met this guy on Match.com, and she called me up and wanted a consultation, and she said, you know, your company got highly recommended. Can I come and talk to you? And I said, sure. And she comes in and she says, I asked her to see some of the writing that he has written to her. And I could tell right away that she's never going to find out who this person is. And so I said, I'm sorry, but I can't help you because, you know, it's probably somebody sitting in some internet cafe and you're never going to know, you know, who this person is. She wanted to marry him. I mean, and she had never met him. So,
Oh my God.
yeah, it really happens. Shocking, but it really happens. So she was out my office door, and I stopped her and I said, oh, by the way, have you sent him any money? And she said, yes, I have. And I said, how much have you sent him? And she said, I sent him $800,000.
What?
Yeah, shocking. I almost fell off my chair, actually. So I said, you know, if you want to hire me to find your money, I can find your money. I do fraud work, so. So that was a really long case, and
Did she hire you
she did hire
to
me.
get the money back?
She did, but you know, her bank flagged the first like 200,000, and then, but then I guess she went to her bank and said, you know, this is my money, I can do whatever I want with it. So she sent another wire, 500,000, I believe, went to Ningbo, China. And so then I hired a Mandarin speaking young woman from UT to call the bank and found out that the account was still open, and the account wasn't in an individual's name, it was in a company name. And so then I told her, because my company does a lot of work with Jackson Walker in Houston, Dallas, and Austin. And so I had reached out to them and asked them for a referral to an attorney in Shanghai. And so she ended up hiring somebody in Shanghai, and then she wanted me to go to China with her, and I didn't want to go. So I said, you know, you'll be fine there. They speak English, you know, they'll help you, they'll guide you, you know, probably take a train to Ningbo. So she ended up going by herself and, you know, with the assistance of this firm that she hired. And so then the account was still open, and so I guess she filed something with the police there, and then she came home, and then this took, I'm just kind of condensing all this because this took like a year, but a lot of money went to the an account in Southfield, Michigan. And so I sent my team to Southfield, Michigan. She hired an attorney there to pierce the corporate veil. And so we went into this company. It was also a company wired with audio and video. And they were a Nigerian couple who kept a very low profile. Their children went to private schools, but they didn't drive fancy cars or anything. And we did surveillance on them for probably 3 weeks. And so they were making drops of money, deposits at ATM machines all over the city. But just to make a long story short, my client just was a little, I don't know how to put it nicely. So she ended up calling me and told me, you know, you're not going to believe what I did. And I said, what did you do? And so she sent an email to the attorneys in Shanghai telling them that she thought that they were in on this scam. So it just was one thing after another like that. And so then the attorney called me from Southfield and said, you're not going to believe what she did is another thing. And I said, I'll believe it, what? And so anyway, she went to this couple and wanted to settle with them. And so, you know, at that point, I just terminated our agreement. And that was it.
Because you were trying to get all of her money back.
Yeah.
And she just wanted to settle at that point.
She did.
Was it because it had been so long or?
No, I think she just, I don't know what I don't really know what her motives were, but, so we had, you know, I had called IC3 with FBI, that's the financial crime part of it.
Mhm.
And they never even responded to me, but one of my clients who's an attorney had some contacts with the DA's office in Southfield, Michigan. And so we were ready to press federal charges on this couple. But she didn't listen to anybody really. She just kind of did her own
I
thing
think
and
she somehow had been manipulated emotionally by,
by the guy.
yeah.
Oh,
by
yeah.
The guy who probably wasn't a guy.
Oh, yeah, sure, because after he allegedly died, coming to the you know, in the airport, coming to see her. His best friend needed money for his funeral, you know, and then asked her for another, you know, $20,000 or whatever it
They
was.
saw her as an easy mark.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Jameson, did she already have a lot of money?
She did,
Yeah,
yes.
just kind of clueless about I mean, it wasn't important enough to her.
No, that's correct.
Had she inherited it or something?
No, she
Oh,
didn't.
really? Cause I could see like. If
Well, I think she inherited part of it,
Okay.
but the rest, no.
How do you coordinate with law enforcement? So that's what I'm curious about when you're talking about 3 weeks of surveillance in Michigan.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking perhaps you might be running afoul of local laws. I'm not sure how that works with PIs.
Well, Michigan is not reciprocal to Texas. So when we went in, we actually talked to the Michigan Private Security Board and told them that we wanted to come in and do some investigation there. Because I got to the point in my career that I don't subcontract to anybody anymore. I learned my lesson right off the bat, and it's just, I have 100% confidence in the people that I've hired, and I've gotten bad results from people that I've subcontracted to. So, so the Michigan company, the board from the Michigan PI licensing board, gave them permission and gave us permission to come in there to work.
So you can't just roll up,
No, you can't just roll up.
depending on the state, I guess.
Yes, it depends on the state, right?
Was there any point where did it ever occur to her that this wasn't a real guy?
I think that's hard to say. I think at some point, I mean, how can you marry somebody you've never met? No, so that's a little daunting, but, yeah, I guess at some point she had to have, but, these people, and I've worked other cases where this has happened. This is the first big, huge case, for the amount of money that she sent. But I've worked other cases where people have paid money. And what happens to people who are lonely is that it's a grooming process. And
Mhm.
so they tell you things that you want to hear and they build up your they try to give you self-esteem and confidence and they tell you how wonderful you are and it just happens, then they build, trust. And then you trust them. So when somebody asks you for a small amount, that's what they usually do. They ask you for a very small amount. I need, $300 for something. Can you send me 300? Oh, sure. Then if 300 becomes 1,500, 1,500 becomes, a couple thousand, and then it goes up from there.
Well, we heard from the financial fraud people in Austin
Mhm.
before the pandemic, and they said a lot of this, and they also said that when the Nigerian prince gets your money, you're not getting it back because there's no reciprocal agreement. But these people, I mean, you could get them in Michigan, and you could get them in China also. Or they get-
Yeah, China was a little difficult, but I think if she had stayed with the case and hadn't done some of the things she did, I think, people would have probably, there would have been charges pressed and, I think she probably could have gotten, I think we got some money back, but then,
And she went off over there too.
yeah.
And well, that was one of the things they said, they'd go in and tell somebody, well, whoever you're sending money to isn't real. And, oh, but he is, I have pictures of his kids. And they don't believe the person in the room with them, but they believe all this other.
Oh, and they send you documents that look absolutely real, like a passport, and I've seen many fake passports come through. And I mean, to the average person, they look real.
You have a pro like that, what's the key thing that messes it up for them eventually? Or does it get messed up for them eventually? What finally brings them down if they end up?
Excuse me, can you, I can't hear, what are you
Uh,
saying?
so I'm asking, so if you have somebody who's a pro, like the couple in Michigan that was, stealing money from her client, what's the thing that brings them down eventually? What's the error that they make? What kind of error do they make that makes them finally have a consequence to pay for what they've done? Or do they get away with it? A
Well,
lot of the time.
I think most of the time they get away with it.
Yeah.
In this instance, though, she filed suit against them. And so, after she filed suit, there was discovery. So we got all of their bank statements. And then I was able to comb through all of their bank statements and the level of fraud was just astronomical. I mean, it was all over. There was insurance fraud. And you could see wires, that came in from all over and then, wires that came in from, that came in maybe from 300,000 and up, and then wires that would go out in less than $10,000 increments, so not to raise a flag, to, London and it go to some like, PO box or, then here it would go to here and here, there, it was just.
So she filed a civil suit, but what about all the criminal things that you found?
Well, she didn't stay with it.
But couldn't that be, I mean, would the federal authorities be interested in any of the things that were discovered?
Well, IC3 wasn't interested at all, and I
Oh.
thought that IC3 would be interested in for that amount.
So they would have to, somebody would have to pick
Right,
it up. Think
right,
it was big enough to pick up. or-
right. But yes,
You use the word criminal. So somebody contacts me online, I'm very receptive, they need money and I send it to them. What exactly is the crime? They asked, I sent it freely. What's the crime?
well, I'm not a police officer, but,
Or anybody who has a legal. I gave it to them freely. They didn't hold a gun to my head. They didn't threaten me online. They
But if
didn't
they
use,
misrepresented themselves.
they misrep, but is that a
Wouldn't
crime?
that be fraud?
it's fraud.
If I tell you I'm a beautiful young 20-year-old, I'm misrepresenting myself. But that's a lie. But why is it a crime?
Well, they sent money across state lines, like for this one, because we did pull, find out all their, their bank statements and everything about them, we got in discovery. So when, you saw all these big amounts coming in from people and, they were scamming her, obviously.
And you mentioned insurance fraud, so I would think that like the insurance companies would be.
Yeah.
You would think,
You would
because
think.
you know what I did? So after that was all over, I went back to this insurance that I found. So this company was, this insurance company, actually is Liberty Mutual, was paying this individual like 10,000 a week, for probably over 20 years.
And that hits us in our premiums.
Yeah, exactly.
So we should all get.
So, because he was allegedly a paraplegic and due to some accident. So I looked into that a little bit more. I found the recipient of the money and I looked into him a little bit more. And then I found out he was a registered sex offender in Michigan. So I called the police there and I said, you know, does Mr. So-and-so come in to register? Does he register every 3 months? And they said, yes. And I said, well, how does he come in? In a wheelchair? And they said, no, he walks in. And I said, do you have, do you have cameras in your squad there? And he said, yes, we do. And I said, can I get, some video of him coming in? And they said, well, you have to send in for an open records request, which I did. And I got the video. And I sent it to Liberty Mutual. I called them up and I said, you know, you've been paying this guy for 20 years and he's not a paraplegic. And you know what they told me? They said, we don't care.
What?
I was shocked.
They just write it off.
They write it off. I was shocked.
So we don't care as in, we won't,
We won't look into it.
so they're just gonna keep paying him.
They keep paying him. It's shocking.
It is.
There should be.
Because the person
if
that
it
was
is-
authorizing that payment might be getting something. Remember, somebody's got to authorize it.
Yeah.
So got to be a signature
Right.
someplace.
Right.
So when they say, well, we don't care because the person who was
Was in-
authorizing it has a quote interest in it,
Yeah. I'm sure-
possibly.
Possibly. But you know,
I'm
I'm
thinking
not
like
getting paid,
criminal.
so I don't want to.
Yeah.
What other kinds of cases?
That's shocking.
Do you take on? I think in the popular mythology with Sam Spade, people like yourself are chasing down no good husbands who have multiple women on the side. Is that actually part of your like bread and butter, or is it just?
No,
numbers?
I'm very selective on what cases I take now. There's so much drama involved with like a cheating spouse. And so I'll only take a cheating spouse if it relates to them having children or there's a sizable marital estate. Because in Texas, infidelity affects custody issues and it also affects the marital division of property.
Hmm.
So that's when I'll take it.
What would be your, if you have a buffet of cases to choose from, what are the cases that you really enjoy the most?
Missing person cases,
Mhm.
fraud cases. Let me think, background work. I do a lot of background work for companies. I do a lot of personal injury work for attorneys. So, you know, looking into a company, you know, any violations with their vehicles or dump trucks or, yeah, like those
Mhm.
kind of things.
And how long does a case, you said that this one lasted more than a year. How
Mhm.
long, is that typical?
No,
How long do cases normally last? Does it just depend?
it depends how much work we do.
Mhm.
Some surveillance cases last, you know, depending on how much surveillance we're doing, sometimes a month, sometimes 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Fraud cases, PI cases can last. I've been working on one PI case, personal injury case for an attorney, probably for, I don't know, a year or so.
Mm-hmm. So you have several going at once
Mhm.
usually. Okay. And you said when you saw this one woman's documentation, that you knew right away that it wasn't real.
Oh, absolutely.
So is that common that if somebody shows you something and you just, how do you know if something is legit or not?
Well, I can tell the way they write. So, I can tell that English is not their first language.
Mhm.
And that's what I look for first. You know, and it's all flowery language. It's not, you know, people don't speak like that.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's how I can tell.
And you said maybe if you were looking at a fake passport that you could tell, maybe not everybody could tell. But how do you tell?
From the numbers on the bottom. And, you know, if anything was like copied, you know, you can tell, because sometimes what they do is they put it in Photoshop, you know, they'll put the real one in Photoshop and they'll copy the real one and then they'll Photoshop it out. And so they'll make it with their name and their picture, but you can see little nuances. I don't, if I really can't tell, I have somebody on my staff who does, he's a master in Photoshop. And so I'll send it to him and let him look at it and then he'll tell me, you know, yes or no. And he makes all my fake IDs for me too.
Oh, that's so
How
cool.
many have you got?
Pardon me?
How many have you got?
Oh my gosh, over the years?
Yeah.
I don't know, 100 or so.
Yes.
Do you get to make up your own fake names and stuff, or like, do you?
Yeah, sometimes.
What do you use it for usually?
To get in something, you know, like, we had to go, we were working a conference, and we did, you know, we couldn't register. So we go in like as a media person or something, or we register in a different name from a bank or, you know, something like that. We have to get it, if we have to get in someplace.
Can you tell us about the missing persons cases? That's the
Sure.
first thing you said. but-
Sure. So I get a lot of calls, actually, more so younger people than older people. And they usually have some sort of mental illness or they're on drugs or they're addicts. And, I got hired by these parents, who lived out of state to find their 19-year-old son was a heroin addict. And he went missing and he was gone for, oh, I don't know, 6 months. And that makes it actually more challenging for us because if somebody goes missing, we want to hear from that person. We want to hear from the parent or whoever's going to hire us, you know, within that first week. Because the chances of finding somebody within that first week is greater than if they wait for, you know, months. So anyway, they hired us and, you know, what's really important is getting people on the ground fast. So I have, you know, many employees, not many, but I have, you know, more than 2. And so we know where to look in Austin. We know where, young people go, we know where, they panhandle. And so we located him probably within 2 weeks. And I made contact with him. And I asked him if I could buy him some dinner. And so I took him to a restaurant and I told him I was with a ministry of some sort. And I said, you know, I was talking to him and I said, you know, how long have you been on the streets? And he's telling me, and I said, you know, where are your parents? I just asked him and of course he tells me they're horrible people. And, he's just, you know, not happy and, you know, and he's just trying to make it on his own, but, you know, so I bought him a meal and I left. And then I called the parents and I told them we had found him. So we actually followed him from the restaurant to see where he was staying. And he was staying in a burned out trailer, in East Austin someplace with a man who was probably 45. And, so I recommended to the parents that they hire an interventionist. And I have several contacts with interventionists in Austin. So they hired somebody and during the interim between them hiring somebody, we stayed on this person. We kept eyes on until that interventionist could come down and, you know, approach him. So, you know, and it makes it more difficult too for us because when someone's an adult, you know, bless you, you can't, you know, they're an adult. So it's like, if there's a missing person report on there and the cops see them and the cops talk to them and they think that he's okay or he or she's okay, then they say, leave him. So it makes it really difficult for us. And so, there was at one point where, he was, the police had pulled him over for panhandling. And I was witnessing it. And what I did was, I didn't want them to take him in because I knew what would happen with the system. So they would take him in and then the next day they would kick him out and then he'd show, you know, from the jail, then we don't know where he goes. So we'd have to start this all over again. So when he was in the car, I went up to the Austin police officer and I said, please don't take him in. I told him who I was and that we were, you know, watching him for the parents and, you know, and I said, please don't, just don't, you know, please don't take him in. And so he didn't, which was nice. Does that happen all the time? No, but it's good to try. So anyway, they brought an interventionist down and so they got him in a 90-day detox program. And then usually sometimes they don't hear what happens. But I got a call like a month later from the parents and the parents said, we would like to offer the young man that he was staying with a 90-day detox and then a year of inpatient rehab, and we'd be happy to pay for it. And so I reached out to this young man, but he was so high when I talked to him. And he said, you know, is this person coming back? And I said, no. And I said, but you know, you have a beneficiary here who's going to offer you, you know, a bed. I have a bed for a 90-day detox right now, if you'll come with me, and then you'll go into a, you know, a year-long inpatient and it'll all be paid for. And he turned it down. It was really sad. So you deal with, those kind of things happening. And, you know, mental illness, you know, in combination with, you know, drug addiction, it's really awful.
When you were approaching somebody like, well, I have so many questions. I know you probably all do, but how are you watching somebody, you know, from far away? Are you in your car? And then like when it's time for you to come up to this young man and talk to him and you're, you know, say pretending to be somebody with the ministry, like, are you nervous? Like, how do you, you're dealing with the conflict, but you're kind of pretending to be in an alternate identity. How do you embody that in a moment of conflict? I don't know. I'm trying to envision being able to do that. Do you feel nervous? Do you,
No.
yeah.
No, not at all.
How?
But it comes with years
Yeah,
of, you know, and that's why when I hire people, I say you have to be comfortable telling people, you know, that you're a different person than who you really are, you know, to get information, right?
do you like construct this identity in your head ahead of time, or do you have to kind of improvise them in the moment?
No, just in the moment, you know, because so what happens is like, you know, he was standing on a corner, right? And, you know, off of the expressway. But, you know, then he walks, you know, he'll walk into a parking lot and he'll sit down for a little bit, you know, so I didn't go up to him right away when he was standing there because, you know, I have somebody with me in a car and then we have like maybe 2 people on foot. So in
Okay.
case he walks someplace, we're able to follow.
Mhm.
But so when I see him go in the parking lot, then I'll just pull up in my car and I get out and I just approached him. I said, hi, you know.
Mhm.
How are you? Can I buy you a meal? You
Yeah.
know?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so he said, sure. So, yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where you felt that it was dangerous, that it was unsafe, or do you try not to put yourself into situations like that?
Well, if I'm in a usually if I feel like there's the potential for feeling unsafe, I usually bring somebody with me who's a personal protection. And they're usually armed.
Okay.
So I have that on my staff too. So, yeah. Like when we go retrieve stolen merchandise, you know, at a house in the dark or something, you know, I don't want to go by myself. I mean, I go, but I usually go with somebody and then I stand back and then my agent will knock on the door, you know, I'll be behind. So
Do you have a lot of disguises?
I do.
Yeah. And like different like wigs and costumes?
I
and-
do have wigs.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. And even the guys have, you know, we have fake beards that they put on because that's really important. You know, you have to change your appearance, especially if you're following somebody for a long period of time. And we change cars, and you know, you have to change your appearance. You can't, you know, we put on different shirts, different, you know, hats or ball cap or,
Have you ever had anybody suspect that they were being followed by you?
oh, sure. Yeah, it happens. And then we just usually break off, and then come back, maybe 2 days later and in another vehicle or something. And we keep my rule of thumb is to keep anywhere between a 6 and a 10 car length distance. But sometimes it can't be helped. You have to go closer, especially with traffic in Austin now. So even if you are close to somebody, doesn't really matter because everybody's kind of, and sometimes we tag. So sometimes we'll have, when we do surveillance, I'll have 2 agents working instead of 1. So somebody will be behind him and somebody will they'll piggyback him, somebody he'll be in the middle and they stay in the front to keep him in check, It's really hard to follow a motorcycle. That's what, but I have an agent who's really good at it.
Stolen personal property cases where you go to retrieve it.
Uh-huh.
Can you give me an example of how you located and
Yeah, sure. So I had one case where I had a online retailer call me and he said that it was a camera company and they sent out some very expensive camera lenses to this address in Austin. So I guess they rented these lenses and they never sent them back. So he gave me the address where they were sent. And I was in the parking lot and I sent one of my guys in. And they knocked on the door and this young man answered and I could hear because he was on his phone and he let me hear what was going on. And we were recording it. And so we asked him, you got delivered these lenses and you never sent them back. And the guy said, well, I don't know anything about it. So I thought, okay. So I came up and I said, well, is this your signature? Because we had a signature. I said, is this your signature? He says, yes. And I said, well, then we need to know where these lenses are. And so he says, oh, I don't know anything. And then there's this young girl who kind of popped up and she said, oh, you better tell them. And so, and I said, if you don't tell me, I said, this is a state jail felony. So I'm going to call the police right now. And I took out my phone like I was going to call the cops. And he says, okay, fine. Okay, fine. And he said, I accepted them for a friend of mine. And I said, well, who is this friend? Does this friend have a name? And he said, yes, his name is Eddie. And I said, okay, let's give Eddie a call. And I said, when you call him up, put him on speakerphone. I want to hear what he has to say. So he put him on speakerphone and he says, oh, there's these 2 people here and they're looking for the lenses, and I spoke up and I said, hey, Eddie, I said, this is Jameson Travis, the Travis Investigations. And I said, where are you? I'd like to come and talk to you. And then the guy was saying something. I said, I want to come and talk to you now. So the young guy said, okay, fine, we'll go. I'll meet you, we'll go there. So I said, well, let's go. You can take us to him, So I said, I'll wait for you in the parking lot. I know you drive that little Honda. And he says, how do you know I drove a Honda? And I said, I know everything about you. So he took us to this guy named Eddie. And I told Eddie, I said, where are these lenses? And he said, well, I sold one on Craigslist and the other 2 I have. I said, okay, you have until midnight tonight to bring me these lenses. And this is way back when Hooters was on Riverside there.
Mhm.
And I said, I'll meet you in the Hooters parking lot at midnight and you'll give me the lenses. And I said, if you don't show up, I'm going to the police. So he shows up and I brought somebody with me. So he shows up and he, of course, I got his license plate and everything. And he lifts up his trunk and he takes out the lenses. He gives me the lenses. And so we were standing there talking to him and he was talking about shooting pool. And I said, oh, you shoot pool? And he said, yeah. And I said, I do too. And so he said, well, what kind of cue do you play with? And I said, well, I have a 1977 Viking 21 ounce. And he says, wow, that's a nice stick. So anyway, so, and I told him, I said, I'm on to you, Eddie, And so then, he leaves, and the next day I called my client. I said, I retrieved 2 lenses. I sent them back to him, and I think I'm done. Well, 3 weeks later, I get a call from the same retailer. He says, he's done it again.
What?
Yes, and he's done it again. And this time the lenses were sent to an Airbnb. So I had Eddie's phone number and I call him up and I say, hey, Eddie, what are you doing? And he says, what do you mean what I do? And I said, listen, I'm on to you. I know exactly what you're doing. Why are you doing this? Well, then I looked up Eddie, before all this, and he's a really good black and white photographer.
Oh.
And I was shocked that he like stooped to this kind of level. And I would tell him on the phone, I say, Eddie, you're really talented. I said, why are you doing this?
Mhm.
And, and I think a lot of it was drugs because he was high on drugs. And so, so anyway, I kept tabs on Eddie O'Brien. I could say his last name. I kept tabs on Eddie O'Brien for probably 3 months. And I put together a whole case. So not only did he steal lenses, but he stole all this other merchandise from all these other retailers and had them shipped to all these Airbnbs all over the city.
My gosh.
So I put together a whole package. I went to Austin Police Department, their financial crimes unit, and I waited for somebody to talk to me. Finally, somebody comes and talks to me, and I take this big package of evidence and I push it across the desk of this lieutenant. And I say, here you go. I've just done your case for you. So now you just have to go and arrest this guy. So I have a contact I had a contact in financial crime. She's not there anymore. And I called her up and I said, when you arrest him, please look to see if my client's lenses are there. And I gave her all the serial numbers on these Leica lenses and bodies. And so she calls me up about 3 months later and she said, I just wanted to let you know, Jameson, we indicted him and we didn't find the lenses. And I said, well, if you do, I know you have to hold them for evidence, and she said, oh, you know what else we found in his apartment? We found all these lists of names of everybody's name, date of birth, address, social security number, and credit card numbers. So I'm sure he was buying lists and just stealing all this information. So then, but in the meantime, so Eddie calls me up. This is before the indictment. He calls me up I called him up because I was looking on his website. I really like this one painting, this one photograph. And I said, Eddie, I said, he says, well, I told him, I said, you're really talented. And I said, I really like this one photograph. And he goes, did you want to buy it? And I said, no, I don't want to buy it. He goes, well, how about we trade for it? And I said, what do you want to trade? And he goes, how about your stick for the picture? And I says, well, and I know this is going, I said, you're going to be indicted soon. I told him, this is before the indictment. I said, you're going to be indicted soon. I said, how would that look on me if, I'm trading with somebody, and when I have to maybe go testify. And I said, plus you should save your money, Eddie, because you're going to need a really good criminal attorney. And so, it's funny. So anyway, he was indicted and I don't follow it. So
Did you have to testify?
I didn't.
Your evidence and I guess
Probably.
it spoke for itself.
Spoke for itself, probably. Yeah.
Maureen, we do have a couple chat questions, I
Oh.
think.
Okay, yeah, wait, somebody else had a question too, so, okay, all right, so let's see. Sorry about that. Okay, questions. One, how did she get clients when she first started? And did it seem harder because you were a woman?
Yes, it was hard to get clients in the beginning. And in the beginning, I worked for a company, Adams and Associates, Jerry Adams, and he never put me on his license, but he hired me. And in the beginning, he he gave me all the bottom of the barrel cases that took me out till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and paid me $20 an hour. And I took every single case he threw my way. And he, and I consider myself a pretty good writer because I write short stories. And he, I would do my report and I would fax it into him and would come back with all these red marks on it. And I was like, what? And so I'd correct everything and I'd fax it back to him. And then he'd fax it again with all the red marks on it. And I was like, oh my God, you know, what's going on here? And so that went back and forth for a while until I learned how to write a report that will stand up in court. So, yeah, and Jerry, today, so he's always been my mentor. So if I have a hard case or I need some advice, or I always call him up. And what was the other question?
Do you think it was harder because you're a woman?
Yes, in the beginning, because there weren't many female investigators.
Mm.
It was dominated by male. And but now I think there's a lot of female investigators now. But in the beginning, no, there wasn't. Couple, maybe 2.
How many are there in Austin?
Female investigators, there's
Or just every?
oh, lots. 'Cause-
Are there?
Yes, because I was looking, my license is A09738. And that's what A09738, that's six numbers, or, but now there's some people that have like 9 numbers.
Oh my God.
So there's lots now.
What's the background of people who work for you?
Well, I'll tell you off the bat, I will not hire anybody with law enforcement background. And the reason for that is, and I have hired people with law enforcement background, and I've also fired every single one of them.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Because, they cannot think outside the box. And in this business, you have to think outside the box. You have to be creative and you have to think on your feet. And they could not follow directions. And that's really important, because I hired one guy and he, and you know, he maybe have been an, you know, an ex-police officer, but never worked surveillance. So I was training him how to follow, and I said, look, follow me. All you do is have to follow me. You know, I was following somebody else, but I said, all you do is have to follow me. And I have to see you behind me. You know, even if you're 4 or 5 car lengths behind, I still should see your car. And then all of a sudden I don't see him anymore. And I'm thinking, where is he? So I call him up and I say, where are you? And he says, oh, I took another way because I thought I could get there faster. And I said, okay, you can go home. Because that's it for me. If you can't follow directions, you won't work out well with us, with me. So,
And thinking outside the box, can you give us an example of that? Because it sounds like, doesn't it sound like she thinks outside the box a lot?
yeah, little.
Have everything from like homemakers to, I don't know, ex-plumbers. I'm just trying to imagine just the stable of people you must have in your firm. You know, just.
Oh, let's see. Well, a lot of people have come and gone since. I would say probably my best employee was somebody that he was with me for almost 17 years. And he was an entrepreneur, I guess. He owned a business, but he did a little bit of everything. But he was really, really good at surveillance. And, you know, one time he wore a ghillie suit in a pasture, a ghillie suit, where you look like the bushes, you know? And he wore a ghillie suit in a pasture because we were working a very large case in a pasture across the street from this business in the heat for probably 8 hours a day.
Nobody saw him.
And nobody saw him. This is right. But he was always the one who got my money shots, you know, always the one who, you know, just took risks a little bit, you know, because he was the one who said to me, I'll never forget this, we were working a surveillance together. We've had many surveillances together over the years and had lots of time to talk but we were working a surveillance together and I let him be the lead investigator because I just don't like to go really fast. And so he calls me up and he says, where are you? And I said, I'm stopped at the light. And he says, you're stopped at a light? I, I used to always tell my investigators, if you blow a light, it's on you. I'm not paying for it. And he says, well, we're on MOPAC already. He goes, Jameson, you should have blown that light a long time ago.
I'm using that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So, no, but I don't do surveillance anymore unless somebody really absolutely wants me to do surveillance, but typically I don't anymore. It's hard work.
Is that from your car usually, or what does that entail?
Being in a car.
Being in a car.
Sometimes for 16 hours a day, staring at one door and there's nothing happening. So you can't like read the newspaper or read a book
Yeah.
or, you have to be really focused.
Hmm.
And then somebody leaves and it's that, instant, kind of adrenaline thing,
Is that surveillance, is that legal if you're a licensed private investigator, but somehow not legal if you're just like a regular citizen?
Well, there is no reasonable expectation to privacy once you step out of your home.
Good to know. Good to know.
I guess the question put another way, when you have a license as a private investigator, does that enable you to do some things legally that people who don't have that license would not be able to do legally?
No,
Or is it just a credential? Is it more of a credential that enables other people to trust you because you have it?
well, I think in terms of surveillance, I think a layperson or, just somebody else, anybody on the street could follow anybody. But in terms of our license, if we're doing work for court, then you have to have a PI license because we're going to testify. There's the potential of testifying in court for cases.
And
Or-
that's allowed if you have a license, but not allowed if you don't, or it just lends you a lot more credibility as a
It
witness.
lends us more credibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have clients who say, well, I don't want to pay the money. I'm going to follow her myself. And I just tell them that's a bad idea because then you look like a stalker, and the opposing attorney could say, this, why is she following this person? So.
Yeah. We earlier we were talking about the case in, I think it was Michigan, and you went there before you had your team do the surveillance, you got permission, or at least you went and notified a board in the
Correct.
state.
Correct.
And is that just a common courtesy to do that, or is that something that's required?
It's
to do?
required. It's legally, because we were not legally, we could not legally work in the state. We could have gone there illegally, but then, this was, may or may not have gone to court, but we don't
Okay.
have that chance.
Okay, yeah, so you could do it, but if you didn't have the permission or the authorization, then you couldn't, if you found something, you couldn't testify about it in court, and
Yeah.
then it would be sort of wasted effort, I guess.
Right.
And you didn't notify the police department, you notified, you said a securities board?
No, there's
State-
state licensing
State
board.
licensing.
Right.
Is that true for every state that you need to do that?
No, not for every, it depends, because there are some states Texas is, that they're reciprocal to Texas. But if, and then this was a big case, typically if I have something in another case, I'll hire somebody, to work that other case. It's hard to find people, but I had one guy who worked for me years ago. He followed this woman across 4 states when she was driving.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
And she never noticed?
no.
What would you say is the percentage of your cases that do wind up in court, that you or somebody on your team winds up testifying in court about it?
I'd say 40% maybe.
Wow. So a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. And it's usually like I have one now, one of my guys has to do a deposition next week on a case that he worked.
Do you feel like you, that you read widely so that, I don't know, like you're a great, you're a good pool player and that helped you in that one circumstances. If you read widely, you learn about a lot of different things. Does that help you in your work? Or do you are you just so focused on work that you don't have time to learn about all of these other, I don't know. Do you read a lot?
I read a lot.
Yeah. Do you read a lot of mysteries or do they get
No,
crazy?
because I live it.
Yeah, you live it, yeah.
Mhm.
But, yeah, no, I don't.
No.
What are some things you see on television? Maybe you see television shows with private investigators that they get wrong and
Everything.
Probably everything. I mean, I don't watch programs with PIs in them, but
Hmm.
I guess if, let me think. It's really like any other business. Like, for example, I don't work for anybody unless I have a signed agreement.
Mhm.
That's, really important. I have a blog on my website that you can check out that, I go into, like how to know if you're being stalked or how to, like hiring somebody for inside your home and, so I require a signed agreement and I operate just like an attorney does. I take a retainer and then I bill from a retainer. I don't keep retainers, and I don't go over retainers without verbal or written approval. And if that client interferes with any of my work, like if they show up for an investigation, because it says in the agreement that you can't show up. And if they show up, I'm done. I just cancel the whole thing.
It's not worth it.
No, it's not. My insurance does not allow them to be there.
Hmm.
And my insurance also does not allow, my investigators to bring somebody with them and, for surveillance too, or any kind of work that they're doing.
That's your business insurance?
Yes.
That's liability insurance?
So all your employees carry handguns or
No, not all.
they obviously have concealed carry?
There is no concealed carry in Texas
Oh, right.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they don't have to. But it's their choice if they want to. I used to have a concealed carry way back when, and I traded it for a guitar.
That's awesome. What are some of the criteria that you use to decide whether you're going to work for a client who reaches out, a potential client that reaches out to you?
A client or an attorney? An
A
individual?
client, yeah, an individual who reaches out for a consultation and wants to hire you. What are the criteria that you use to decide whether you'll take that case or not?
It depends on whether I think they're credible or not. I get calls sometimes from people who are have mental illness. Like I had a call yesterday, for example, and the guy told me he was being gang stalked. And, people were listening in his TV and and I know that there are other businesses that will take those kind of cases and charge somebody money, but ethically, it's wrong. And so I just tell that person, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to take your case right now.
Good.
So it's basically, if the case is, it's not going to, I guess if Let's see, that's a good question. How do I?
What about ability to pay? I mean, could somebody try to
Oh.
hire you?
Absolutely, right. No, absolutely. I think, right.
Think it's a charity.
Because you said something earlier about marital estate or something about the
Division of property.
marital division of property. And so an infidelity case, you might consider if there was a large marital estate, I guess if there was a lot of money at stake, or what did
Yeah,
you mean? when-
Not a lot of money that they're gonna pay me, but if they have a lot of money between the two of them, because if we could prove infidelity, then one spouse gets more of a chance of getting more than a 50-50 split. Like
Mhm.
I've worked cases where one spouse got 80-20.
Wow.
And that was mostly because of infidelity was involved?
Correct.
I had no idea. That's a Texas state law thing?
No, it's not a state law, but really depends on the attorney who's trying the case. Travis County is a little bit more lenient than Williamson County. So it really depends what county is in and then what kind of, information, like, if the spouse, has worked all their lives, or if they've been a stay-at-home mother or stay-at-home father, and one is the breadwinner. There's a lot of variables that come into play there.
Mm. So if you think you can actually help this potential client significantly because there's a fair amount of money at stake and there's infidelity, there might be infidelity involved, then you would be more inclined to take that case to try to
Yeah.
help that person
Right.
out.
And then, a lot of times what people do when they're going through a divorce is like one person in the marriage will hide money. And so I can find hidden money. So that's another thing to consider too.
Does your PI license give you access to databases that, how are you able to find that hidden money if like a layperson is not able to?
Well, there's different ways. And yes, there are databases that I use that the layperson can't use. But it's not always using a databases. That's why I wanted to talk about this a little bit about databases. Especially when I do background work, I don't use databases because databases, even the ones that we have as investigators, and not just like Truthfinder out there or, all these other ones out in the internet, but databases are very erroneous and generally the information's not current. So, for example, we pulled trash on a case and found we were looking for money, and this person, we found FedEx receipts where somebody was wiring money, sending money, or we found wire transfer receipts where somebody was wiring money. So you'd be surprised at how much information there is in so much trash.
Oh my gosh.
And once it's out on the street,
It's free game. So what we do for that, to document that, when my investigator pulls up and the can's in the street, we photograph it, that it is in the street. And everything gets photographed along the way. So he brings it to my office and I'm the one who usually goes through it, and I document everything. Before I open a bag, I document. When the bag's open, I take a
chain of.
It's a whole right, right.
So how do you do that discreetly with, like, do you swap out trash cans or?
We've been known to do that too, but some,
you-
we do. Sometimes we don't, sometimes we just, we usually pull in the middle of the night, if somebody brings it out the day before. And then, or sometimes, if it doesn't get put out the day before, we have run the risk of getting there in the morning when people are up and about, and sometimes we just dump and run, basically. Yeah, it's a little bit, Have we been caught? Yeah, sure. I mean, it happens. For someone to say a PI says, oh, we never get caught, that's not true.
So what happens when you get caught? Does
Give me back my trash.
Well, I had a case one time, and Nathan, this guy who worked for me for 17 years, he had a truck, so he would line the bed of his truck with a big plastic tarp. And he got everything loaded up in there, and here comes the woman out, and she sees it, and she grabs a hold of the plastic at his tailgate there, and she yanks it. And some of it fell out onto the street, and he just kept going. But you know, what are you gonna do?
That's awesome. That's really good.
You know, it's like, but you know, I worked a big fraud case 5 years ago where the attorney said to me, you know, Jameson, we need financial documents. We need P&Ls, we need partnership agreements. Can you get those for me? And I said, yeah, the only way we can do that is, I think, would be to pull trash. And this was in a commercial dumpster in a commercial building. And he said to me, you know, everybody shreds.
Mhm.
And I said, but do you know that for a fact? And he said, no. And I said, well, let's just pull once a week for a month and see what we get. So we ended up doing that. And, you know, there were 3 of us. It was a big commercial, you know, concrete pad with 2 big steel doors, and there were 2 cans inside there. And, you know, we had to do some surveillance ahead of time to see what time the cleaning people left. And so we would get there like at 2 o'clock in the morning and all dressed in black, and we had to, you know, block out our license plates because there were cameras in the, you know, cameras when you drove into the garage to park. And we all had red headlamps. And so, you know, one person would be in the can, and there was somebody left a nice shopping cart for us. And
That's helpful.
and so we had to go through probably 200 bags looking for one suite.
Wow.
And, you know, and then when we found the suite, you know, it was like a assembly line. We found the suite, and he pulled the bag and put it in the grocery cart. And then I know what to look for, so I go through it. And, we found so much information from there that first month that when I presented it to the attorney, he was like, holy, And he said, can we pull twice a week? And I said, sure. We pulled twice a week for 8 months, and we made their case.
Wow.
Mm.
So,
Were you also wearing
Wow.
masks?
female?
No,
Oh, okay.
no.
Why the
no.
red headlamp?
Because you can see without causing,
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah, so it doesn't light up in there. No, it
Have you-
echoes.
You haven't ever had like somebody call the police and they show up and say, what are you doing? Or-
Well, I had, so I was working just with David, one of my agents, and he and I were there together, and we thought that the cleaning people had gone. And, you know, when the truck comes to pick up the cans, they sometimes, when they set them down, they sometimes push them all the way back, and then sometimes they don't. So I heard this, you know, rolling of wheels coming down, and I said, David, stop. And you know, you can see out from the cracks. And I look and I see the cleaning people with a big tub of, you know, wheeling a big cart of trash. And I'm like, oh my God. And I said, just stay down where you are. And I tried to sidle myself in between the door and the can to try to get in the back. Because I knew once that guy opened that door, if I can see him clearly, he can see me. But I couldn't make it all the way in the back, and the door is open. And I took off my headlamp, and I just remained motionless. And I could see him clear as day. And then once he saw me, you know, he jumped. And he says to me, what are you doing in here? And I said, you know, I just got a job here. And this is called thinking outside the box. I said, I just got a job here. And I said, he says, who do you work for? And so, you know, I only know one suite in there, and I didn't say that. And I said, you know, I can't remember the suite because this is my second day, but you know, I was eating a donut and I took out my retainer and I put it someplace, and I think it got thrown out in the trash.
Oh my gosh, so clever.
And I said, you know, my parents paid, you know, like $1,500 for this. And, you know, I just can't ask them for a new one. I'm going on and on. And he said, you shouldn't be out here. You know, it's dangerous for you to be out here by yourself. And I said, oh, I'm just trying to find it. I said, could you help me find it, you know? And, he goes, you know, no, and in the meantime, we're talking and he's throwing bag after bag after bag on David. It's all true stories. And of course, then he says, you need to leave now. And I said, okay. And so we kind of fist bumped, you know, and I walk back to I pretend like I'm walking back to my car and he's leaving. And then I ran back there and I'm calling David down in there and he emerges, you know, slowly. He says, oh, my back. I said, yeah, let's get going here. But yeah, lots of things happened while we were there. I mean, I touched a rat inside a bag one time.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was horrible and nobody believed me. Because you can't scream in there, you know, because it echoes.
Are you wearing like thick
Gloves.
gloves so you don't poke
Like,
yourself with anything or?
no,
or
just
like
regular,
Regular gloves?
yeah, gloves and, you know, is very gross. But I found some good things in that trash. I found a really nice pair of headphones that somebody threw out.
You, you kept them?
Yeah, I kept them.
Was there anything that you thought we should have asked about or anything else you think would be very interesting to talk to us about?
Does anybody have any
I
questions?
have a question.
Yeah.
You're talking about missing people. Do you ever work cross-border into Mexico? Looking for people? or
I
work-
have a contact in Mexico,
Yeah,
but chances are, it's not favorable.
oh, no.
Yeah. I'll tell you, this case has bothered me from day one and it's been probably 15 years. But, the mother hired us and she, her daughter graduated from UT at 18, I think it was. And she had a degree in metallurgy. And she met this man on blackpeoplemeet.com. And she got a really good job. And then she told her job that she had to take care of her father who had cancer. And she didn't know when she was coming back. And so she just left. And so we used a program called A-List to locate her car. It's a program that, you know, when the cameras take pictures of your car. And so we found her car in a parking lot in Dallas. And so I called the mother up and I said, you need to get yourself to Dallas, like immediately. And the mother was just so stricken with panic and fear that she couldn't get there. So they were divorced and I called the father in California. He was an entertainment attorney. And I said, we found the car. I said, you need to go there and, you know, knock on doors or call the police or something, because they were out of their retainer. And the dad, so apparently the brother went there and I called the brother up and I said, look, when you go there, don't take the car. I said, let us put a tracker on the car. And they said no. And they went there and they found these lists in the back seat of all these like names, women's names. And they took the lists and then, because they thought, so she called up and said, where's the list? So we knew she was alive at that point. And so, and I strongly encourage them when they go back to put the list back, when you know, the daughter is going to come out to get these lists. I said, there's going to be somebody there with her. And I said, you need to take her, just physically take her and put her in your car. And of course, and call the police. They didn't listen to me at anything. They just handed over these lists to her and she disappeared. And I have a contact with the FBI and missing persons and I reported her. And I'm pretty confident she's deceased and
Yeah.
she's, you know, went to Mexico. So yeah, it's really difficult to find somebody in Mexico, even with my contact.
What was the list of, what was the list for, do you think?
I don't know, probably, I don't know, sex trafficking lists
Yeah.
or something, probably.
How did you develop this network of contacts?
Over the years, because, you know, I work sometimes in conjunction with the police, you know, if somebody has a report or somebody's made a report and then I find out who the detective is and, yeah, over the years I've made contacts.
Of your clientele, would you say is half parents or other people and half lawyers?
I would say probably a little bit more than half are attorneys. I get a lot of repeat business from attorneys. And then the rest, maybe 35-40% are individuals who call me, based on seeing on my website or something, or a referral from an attorney.
And have you ever had, the police contact you for a cold case?
No, but I did have them contact me years ago when I had a contact who was, a hostage negotiator in another state, and he was monitoring some chat room and was talking to some guy who was a pedophile who was talking about that he lived in Austin, Texas. And he called me up and he asked me if I could get in this chat room as a young person and see if I can, not too young, but somebody his age, like maybe 23 or something. And I did, and I was able to get information on this person. And then when this person sent me some photographs is when I called the police. And then I told them, I said, he doesn't want to chat on the computer. He wants to meet. So you're going to have to kind of set something up and meet with this person.
Mm.
Yeah.
I would die to ask you something about the first case you talked about with the $800,000
Uh-huh.
that went around the world. Okay, so you said you didn't want to go to China with the client, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's say it's even harder than going to China. Let's say it's, for example, off planet, because science fiction, right? So let's say you've got a client that needs you to go with them a really, really far away. Have you had a client in your career where you would have said, yeah, I'll go with you to China, I'll go with you to the Andromeda system, I'll go whatever it takes to take care of this? And if so, what was the characteristic of the client or the case that would make you say, I'm all in, I'll go wherever you need me to go?
I'm all in.
Yes.
I have to think about this,
Yeah.
I've been in business 23 years. Let me think. Have I ever been all in?
Yeah.
Thinking, let's see. Probably not,
Okay.
probably not.
There's
You know-
thinking outside the box, but you're not gonna get locked in the box.
Well, I'm a neutral third party when people hire me, and so I don't get emotionally attached. Although I did on this Simone case, the girl who disappeared, but I don't get emotionally attached, so you just can't.
Hmm. It's a good question, though, thinking about what would it take,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Huh.
You couldn't be a neutral third party at that point.
What flips the switch so you're no
But with-
longer a neutral third
Right.
party?
Yeah.
That's a
Mhm.
novelist. Yeah.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
And you did.
What, you said that, you wouldn't hire any more people with law enforcement backgrounds.
Correct.
What is the kind of person that, what kind of person makes a good private investigator? What sort of background, if there's any background that goes into it, or just maybe personality traits?
I think it's just personality. I interview everybody, so I think I'm a really good read of character. I can tell when somebody's lying. I can tell if somebody's, embellishing a little bit, and I check out everything, so about that person. So, so what would be a good person? Basically, somebody that's creative, and I ask people up front, are you okay with, going into a bar and telling the bartender that you work, you're somebody that, you're really not. I mean, you have to be
Mhm.
comfortable doing that. Not everybody's comfortable with that.
Mhm.
I hired one woman many, many years ago and she wasn't comfortable with that at all.
Mhm.
So, you have to be kind of comfortable
Mhm.
to get information, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And a good actor.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. Yes, you have to be a good actor. I'll tell you a funny story. My son, I have one child, he's now 27, But when he was in fourth grade, there was like a parent-teacher conference or whatever, and I was standing talking to some parents, and I saw him, talking to these parents over here, near me, but talking over there. And I was listening a little bit, and I heard one of the parents say, "Oh, what does your mom do for a living?" And I thought, oh, I kind of took a breath, like, oh my God, what's he gonna say? And then he says, "My mom, she's a professional liar." And I asked him about that later, and I said, "Well, how come you told them I was a professional liar?" "Because I hear you on the phone. When you're on the phone with somebody, you say, I have to go, I'm in a meeting."
Did the other parents ever say, so what is it? that
No,
you-"
they just didn't kind of say anything. They just kind of like backed up a little bit and kind of moved away from him.
Meetings, do you go to any conferences to learn anything for your?
I used to, I just don't anymore. I found early on that a lot of those are, basically just to get your continuing education hours. But I found that, I never really learned anything per se, because it was just all everybody's talking about, all their stuff that they do. It's just, I can learn stuff by, reading and, trial and error and, like, I used to make these books, with hidden cameras in them. And, you could just carry them into a restaurant and just put a bunch of them, on top of each other, and you can videotape somebody, 5 tables away. And then you don't have to hold up your phone.
You're very creative. I mean, that's what people think about.
Do you keep up with the latest equipment?
Somewhat I do. Yeah, I don't know how many companies have this, but I have a Generation 3 night vision scope that I attached to an actual video camera with a long lens attached. And then I took it to a welder here in town, and I had him weld me a brace. Because it's heavy, it's long now, but I can, I can stand on the Congress Avenue Bridge and at night and zoom up to, like the Estonian, and get clear pictures of somebody on a balcony.
It's cool.
So
Really cool.
it's a cool thing. It's a cool piece of equipment.
So
But
so have you been spying on Elon Musk or anything?
No. But, nowadays, your iPhones are sometimes better than, any kind of camera you can use. No, but we make sure we download apps, that document date and time. So when we always shoot every hour, no matter where we are, to document that we were there.
Yeah.
I run a tight ship with me.
Well, that's awesome. I know that we're past the 3:30 cutoff. So I think we're probably gonna go ahead and wrap it up, but really, thank you so much for coming and
Oh,
spending
sure.
time with us and answering our questions.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. It really was. Thank you so much, Jameson.
Yeah, thank you. And please help yourself with the snacks and things. So please help yourself and
Oh,
yeah. What did you say?
She does pass out
Business
business cards.
cards.
I didn't bring any, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Could you tell us your website, your blog?
Yes, it's travisinvestigations.com.
TravisInvestigations.com. Okay.
Are you hiring?
I might be.
I got a ghillie suit wearing guy right
Yeah, I always look for good investigators. They're hard to find. They really are. I think that's my one challenge that I've had throughout this whole career, is finding good investigators.
You take interns often or?
I'll take somebody that has no experience, but I have a training program that's part of my company policy. And so it's like a 3-month training period. And so I'll train them, and then I'll put them with a seasoned investigator, for a while. So.
Pretty cool.
Part of that training program is they have to spend the night in a dumpster.
No, but maybe they have to go through trash. Nobody likes to go through trash, obviously, but you know, it's the nature of the business, you know, and then you have to, you can't leave, you gotta pee in a cup, right? So that's, you can't say, oh, I gotta go to the gas station because I have to go to the bathroom, you know?
Oh my gosh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah. I had one woman, I'll just tell you, so I had one woman, I was hiring her, this was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And we were in a panel van and I brought with me some, battery powered fans because we couldn't leave the car on. It was in the summer and I told her, I said, before you come, make sure you bring like a cooler, with some ice and, to stay hydrated and bring yourself like a towel you can wrap around your neck, because it's gonna get hot in there. And so we were in a parking lot and and I couldn't run the van, but I got some cross ventilation, and opened the windows, just a scant, on little sides and about half hour into it, she says to me, "Are you hot?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm hot. Of course I'm hot." And she says, "Oh, I'm really hot." And I said, "Well, let's not talk about being hot because, the more you talk about being hot, the more you're gonna be hot." And so, then an hour went by and she says to me, "Are you hot?" And I said, I told her, I said, I thought we agreed not to talk about being hot. She says to me, "I'm gonna die in here." And I said, "You're not gonna die in here." I said, "People lived without air conditioning." I said, "I'll put it over your neck or something." She says, "Are you hot?" And I said, "Yes, of course I'm hot, but you're gonna make it, believe me." So that was it for me.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll see
Bye,
you
everybody.
next month we'll be at West Bank, remember, for David, police detective. Okay, see you guys.
Bye-bye. Good
Bye-bye.
night. Goodbye. Good night.